Hello, Philip Nathan here again. This video is about our being just and fair in our own individual lives, in the decisions and actions we take, as well as our pursuing justice and fairness in broader areas of our lives, in terms in particular of pursuing social action by our communities, societies, and within our broader humanity. Of course, pursuing justice and being just and fair in our lives is an essential element of our positive humanist personal conduct and is of great importance to our own well-being and the well-being of others. Indeed, a sense of fairness and justice is a fundamental part of our human selves and is a fundamental, frequent and prominent component for many of us of our human experiences and our personal action and our conduct day to day. We all want and need fairness and justice, to be behaved towards with fairness and justice requiring that we give fair and just treatment to others, that others, our social entities, behave towards us and all others in a just and fair manner. Perhaps the prominence of ideas of fairness and justice in our lives has come to the fore most predominantly in our encounters with injustice and unfairness in situations which we may encounter day to day at home, in our families, at work, or in many other areas of our lives. Though in our modern world, with communications we have, with systems we have, which can make others far away seem very close to us, and those areas of our lives far away from our close and more immediate relationships, we can become painfully aware of injustice, pain, suffering, cruelty, visited far away from our homes. In our families, some of us may feel strongly that we experienced instances of injustice and unfairness, perhaps in our childhoods, in our upbringing. And these moments, these events and experiences may stay with us, lying deep in our memories and deep in our hearts. In our work context, we may feel we've been behaved towards in unfair, disrespectful ways. Our talents and abilities perhaps not being recognized, acknowledged, our route to promotion barred, often for reasons we might think unfair and unjust. And of course, it would be painful to have such experiences and to feel that way. Moreover, in our family life and in our work context, others should behave towards us with respect and consideration, with fairness and justice, and we should behave towards others in that same way. That being said, and while our environment should be places where fairness and justice should be present and must be encouraged, it's also the case that the systems we operate in, both smaller and larger contexts, through the attitudes promoted, through the range of procedures and processes in place, through culture and values, these systems can implement injustice, unfairness, and resultant pain and suffering in our lives in both practical and emotional terms. And where such system-based unfairness and injustice may be present, of course, those unfair and unjust systems cannot operate if the many of us are firstly aware that this is what is occurring, and secondly, if we, the many of us, refuse to cooperate with implementing such injustice and unfairness. As individuals operating in such systems, we must not acquiesce and implement injustice and unfairness, but must do our utmost to change such systems and cultures, and must pursue fairness and justice, thereby supporting our own well-being and happiness and the well-being and happiness of others. In broader social contexts, beyond our local and family contexts, crucially, there may be significant political and economic injustice, which, through the operation of unfair economic and social practices, through imbalances of power, and through profound negative, destructive selfishness usually enacted by those who are in power, those who are wealthy and powerful. Such social and economic injustice can and often does place others and leaves others in poverty, suffering in pain, through inadequate income, lack of basic facilities, inadequate social provision, inadequate diet, illness and disease, creating suffering to a significant degree. a situation usually supported by and co-occurring with vast disparities of wealth and power. The degree of poverty and suffering caused by these unjust and unfair economic systems is, however, sometimes difficult to see. With the existence of poverty, the conditions of those who are poor, those enduring financial and personal stress and suffering, with these people, those being some of us, with these people not being the object of so much publicity, not representing the exciting news stories upon which some much media attention is based, or not really being the concern of those who have influence, power and wealth. And even where acknowledged and known about, such poverty is often attributed in the public domain, or even widely believed to be, due to the fecklessness, laziness, lack of skills, education, ability. With such generally false explanations, often supported by some or many of those with wealth and power, promoting those ideas, with these people wishing to protect their wealth and power, frightened of losing that wealth and power. Yet such unfair and unjust economic and political systems are the source of much pain and suffering in our modern world. The pains and suffering that poverty imposes, often, though not always, are imposed through such unjust and unfair economic systems. And in our pursuit of fairness and justice, we need to oppose such unfairness and injustice in our social and economic, and indeed in our political systems. And we need to work on making those changes on a day-to-day level, be concerned day-to-day. Sometimes such economic discrimination ties in with the injustice and cruelty of racial discrimination, or discrimination based on gender or other characteristics. The meting out of cruelty to others based on their race or other innate characteristics, or because of nationality or deeply held personal beliefs, is unjust, vile, and appalling. We should never engage in such conduct. Such discrimination is, as I say, appalling. The mass murders we've seen in history, the genocides that have taken place, appear often to have been due to racist ideologies and false racist and ideological beliefs, leading to vast-scale misery and suffering, intense cruelty. But there's often everyday racism too, where people suffer abuse and discrimination day to day, where some are unable to get jobs, access education, walk the streets safely, obtain the basics of living on the grounds of their race. And women in particular, half of the human population, are unjustly oppressed by men and sometimes other women in many countries throughout the world, where they are denied basic human rights and may live like prisoners, unable to gain the resources necessary to support their freedom, and being subject to violence and cruelty in the home with no access to law and justice. Others are unjustly discriminated against due to their sexual orientation, religious or other beliefs. Atheism will result in the death penalty in a number of Islamic countries, as will homosexuality. While those with disabilities may face serious problems in many contexts. Within the context of support for the well-being and happiness of all, within the context of our pursuit of justice, such unjust discrimination is entirely unacceptable, and in all its forms, in particular in its worst violent forms, is seen here as reprehensible and evil. Within the living humanist framework presented in this guide, we must act to support fairness and justice, and act against such discriminatory injustice and the appalling consequences to us all of such unjust discrimination. When others behave towards us in unjust and unfair ways, dependent on the circumstances and seriousness of the unfairness and of that injustice, we'll often need to take some action, not just in support of our well-being and to reduce our own sense of pain and suffering, but also to protect others from going through similar experiences, should that injustice to us not be dealt with. In more minor cases, where we anticipate others may be accommodating, we may be able to address these individuals or systems directly, indicating our feelings and asking that such action is not repeated again, and perhaps requesting and gaining an apology, requesting important changes, especially where there's been no intent to be unfair. In other contexts, perhaps at work where informal action has not produced any results, then we may need to pursue some kind of formal action to redress what we perceive to be a significant injustice or act of unfairness. In more serious circumstances, we, sometimes together with others, may need to act through the formal legal system to attempt to right injustices and systematic discrimination and unfairness. As I say, allowing injustice and unfairness to remain in place, indeed allowing injustice and unfairness to thrive, for example, through doing nothing about such injustice and unfairness, is unacceptable. And we need to do what we can to remove such injustice. Of course, sometimes, in the face of minor injustice, we will need to balance the effort and commitment the conflict engendered, the injustice engendered, involves, how much energy and effort we'll be expending through our acting for justice against the potential benefits to us and others of removing such injustice and unfairness. Legal systems have been mentioned here. Effective systems, institutions, and organizations are certainly needed to support fairness and justice. Democratic institutions with independent judiciary systems, organizations to ensure that laws are enforced, including policing services, clear expression of laws, and education systems which promote law and justice are all, amongst other entities, needed to ensure justice and fairness in the public space. Not only do there need to be local systems of justice, but it's imperative that there are global systems of justice as well, which can address the most serious international and global crimes, such as waging aggressive war, human rights abuses, and genocide. Those accused of breaches of law need to be able to put their case as far as possible in a public forum, a public and open forum. If faced with such charges, we should be allowed and funded where necessary and as far as possible to receive expert legal advice and to present our case, to adduce evidence in response to accusations against us in a fair and just manner. The principle of assumption of innocence needs to be in place until someone is convicted of a crime or civil offence. Though in the case of the most serious and violent crimes, it may be necessary to detain those who significant evidence suggests have committed such crimes with the purpose of keeping us safe. With regard to serious criminal and other actions which significantly damage our communities, societies, and our broader humanity, acting in support of justice and well-being, those who've committed such crimes will likely need to be detained away from the rest of the community and society, with efforts made to reform and educate those who've committed such acts. It is not just and reasonable to allow those who may have committed such heinous crimes, such seriously antisocial acts, to remain free or to be let loose to do more damage to others in community, society, and in our broader global world. Justice and fairness, humanity, our desire for well-being and to prevent pain and suffering all require that we protect each other, that we protect all others, and that we ourselves are protected from those who may cause us pain and suffering, those who may act in malevolent and destructive ways. We need to protect others as far as we can, and we need to be protected by others, by community, society, and beyond, from those who are damagingly, negatively selfish and destructive. And we need to protect ourselves from those who may be ill and psychologically challenged in a manner which offers significant possibility of pain and suffering. We need to be protected from those who threaten our safety or who may be dangerous and threatening for other reasons. There's much more that can be addressed in regard to fairness and justice, but I'll move to a close on this video with a couple of points here. Firstly, law is not the same as justice. The law and legal systems can be unjust, Not only can they be used by those who are powerful, those in power, to impose injustice in a systematic way, but systems of law and justice can only deliver justice through laws as they stand, and such laws may be insufficient to protect us. Indeed, they may be designed to protect the powerful and leave the rest of us to be exploited and endure pain and suffering. Moreover, inadequate resources may be available to police laws or may be allocated to police laws, allowing injustice to prosper. Legal systems and policing systems may in some jurisdictions be corrupt and delay. There may be delay in legal systems, bureaucratization of legal systems. There may be simple that may interfere with justice, and there may be simple system overload. All of these can lead to delays in justice being delivered or justice not being delivered at all. And of course, even when good systems are in place, mistakes can be made. For this and a range of other reasons tied to well-being and the prevention and reduction of pain and suffering, irreversible punishments such as the death penalty, amputation of limbs, violence against the person of any sort, are unacceptable as responses to breaches of the law. Response to breaches of the laws. The view here is that the vast majority of people, even those who've committed heinous acts, are capable of change and reform. And wherever possible and reasonable, such goals should be pursued, with the caveat that ourselves and others need to be protected, be safe, and kept safe. A final point here is that we may often perceive injustice and unfairness, but well-being is our goal, and the prevention and reduction of pain and suffering, as set out in the core principles in Living Humanism. Insofar as unfairness and injustice cause us pain and suffering, cause pain and suffering to ourselves and others, they need to be dealt with. However, it's highly likely that we'll experience some level of unfairness and injustice in our lives. We do need to act to right such unfairness and injustices, but we need to ensure our own well-being in the broader sense. Focusing continually on unfairness, on equal treatment for all, can distract us from the key goal of achieving overall well-being and happiness, of which fairness and justice is an important part, but which involves more than equality of justice and fairness. Furthermore, it's important to recognize we can't always expect equal or precisely equal treatment on all occasions. Justice and fairness is more than that. Our own actions frequently need to be tailored to those we're dealing with. For example, dealing with children at different ages where different responses are required, with us all having different needs and wants, different characters, and existing in different contexts and circumstances. Practicalities may also stand in the way of providing precisely equal actions towards all. And sometimes we may have to bear some level, hopefully a small sense of unfairness, inequality, and injustice in order for the broader well-being to be supported. Again, there's much more that can be said. The content of this video is expanded on in the Living Humanism Guides, in particular Chapter 6 of Living Humanism Book 1. I hope this video has been of interest to you. If you have any comments, please place them in the comments area below the video. We'll now move on to the next video in the series, which focuses on the area of pursuing pleasure, happiness, and fulfillment, as well as also again focusing somewhat on reducing pain and suffering. Thanks for listening. I'll see you soon.